where color, shape, and structure seem to break every law of nature. From arid deserts, where life is nearly absent, to rainforests, where humidity remains constantly saturated. From lands that change color through layers of mineral deposits, to vast white salt flats that reflect light like a mirror. From giant creatures that shape entire marine ecosystems, to invisible life forms that support the foundation of life itself. These are not just travel destinations. These are the strangest and most spectacular secrets on Earth. The Dead Sea is recognized as the lowest point on the planet at more than 1,400 feet below sea level. This completely isolated basin functions like a massive pressure cooker with extreme salt saturation, reaching lethal levels. Instead of soft sand, the shoreline is jagged with mushroom-shaped salt crystals and razor-sharp salt reefs that can easily slice through anything they encounter. With a toxic salt concentration 10 times higher than the ocean, the osmotic pressure instantly dehydrates any living creature, turning a stray fish into a mummified corpse within mere minutes. One tourist nearly died after accidentally swallowing a mouthful of this thick brine, which caused horrific burns to his lungs and completely paralyzed his internal organs. The brutality is further proven as the water level recedes by over 3 feet every year, triggering thousands of massive sinkholes that open up abruptly like gaping wounds across the landscape. Whitehaven is repeatedly ranked as the most beautiful beach on Earth, yet its permanent population remains 0%. No one, not even the most experienced indigenous groups, has chosen to settle on this shoreline stretching about 4 miles, because the lack of fresh water means thirst would crush them long before hunger. Beneath the crystal clear water drift nearly invisible irukandji jellyfish, measuring only about half an inch, but carrying venom reported to be about 100 times stronger than cobra venom. When strong winds sweep across sand made almost entirely of quartz, the fine silica grains rise into the air like microscopic glass, capable of destroying survival equipment and damaging human lungs. Despite these lethal hazards, modern visitors cling to the edge of the island only a few hours each day, extracting millions of dollars from tourism before quickly retreating back to the mainland. Ironically, the same deadly white sand reflects heat so efficiently that it stays cool even under about 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and similar ultra-pure silica was used in the reflective glass of space telescopes. Known as Chocolate Falls, Grand Falls is famous for its thick, reddish-brown flow, carrying the raw power of nature across the Arizona desert landscape. For most of the year, the site appears as a dry cliff, but during flood season, it transforms into a massive mud waterfall carrying millions of cubic yards of red sediment. What pours over the edge is not clear water, but a heavy mixture of mud rocks and debris, with enough force to crush bones and bury any living creature caught beneath it. Even when the sky above remains clear, storms dozens of miles upstream can suddenly send a giant wall of mud racing through the canyon within seconds. The harsh paradox is that this enormous flow cannot become a water source because the dense sediment and heavy metals make the liquid impossible to purify. Because of repeated dangers and environmental damage, the Navajo Nation closed Grand Falls to visitors in 2023, leaving the desert waterfall isolated once again. Living and navigating through the Corinth Canal in Greece is a risky decision because this artificial waterway cuts a narrow wound into the land where towering rock walls constantly threaten to collapse. The obsession with slicing through this isthmus began in ancient times, and in 67 AD, the Roman Emperor Nero forced about 6,000 prisoners to dig the canal by hand, leaving many dead from exhaustion and falling rock before the project stalled for centuries. When the canal was eventually completed, it passed through soft, sedimentary rock and an active fault zone, which means the steep walls frequently collapse despite massive retaining structures. During World War II, retreating German forces destroyed sections of the canal walls and pushed more than 130 train cars and several locomotives into the channel, turning the bottom into a tangled barrier of steel and explosives. Today, ships passing through the canal move so close to the rock walls that passengers can almost reach out and touch the cliff faces rising on both sides. Above the narrow gorge, nearly 260 feet deep, a bridge spans the canal and has become a famous bungee jumping site where thrill seekers leap into a tight corridor of swirling wind between the towering cliffs. The Eye of the Earth in Croatia is the deepest flooded karst sinkhole in the Balkan region, whose bottom has never been reached. The most experienced cave divers have reached only about 509 feet before stopping, because the dark passages below continue into an unexplored underground network. Water emerging from the depths stays between about 39 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit, even when summer air temperatures above ground exceed 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which can cause severe cold shock within minutes of contact. Around the 105-kilometer-long Seine River stretches a hollow karst landscape where rainwater quickly disappears underground, leaving dry, rocky slopes used for traditional grazing. A medieval cemetery stands directly beside the rim of the sinkhole, with rows of old stone grave markers facing the dark water below. The Chocolate Hills in the Philippines may look like peaceful grassy hills, but they are actually more than 1,776 hollow limestone cones that can collapse without warning. This entire landscape was once an ancient ocean floor, where the remains of countless marine creatures and coral reefs accumulated before tectonic forces pushed them above sea level and rain slowly shaped them into hills rising nearly 390 feet. Almost 1,800 hills are crowded into an area of only about 19 square miles, forming a maze of steep slopes where anyone who loses direction must repeatedly climb and descend until exhaustion sets in. Only sharp kogon grass survives on the dry limestone surface, and during the dry season, the region has almost no water, little shade, and very few natural food sources. There have been moments when someone stepped across the grass and the ground suddenly opened into a dark sinkhole, leaving nothing behind except the silence of the hills where their final footprints once were. Sam Phan Bok in Thailand is the largest field of river-carved potholes in Southeast Asia, where the Mekong River has drilled thousands of holes into a wide sandstone plain. For 6 months during the flood season, the entire rock plateau disappears beneath more than 33 feet of muddy water before reappearing in the dry season as a barren surface filled with deep pits. More than 3,000 holes formed when pebbles trapped in powerful river whirlpools spun for millions of years, slowly grinding into the sandstone. When the water retreats, the exposed plain stretching across many square miles absorbs intense solar heat, which can quickly exhaust anyone walking across the bare rock. This section of the Mekong is also a narrow choke point where massive upstream water flow is forced through a tight channel, increasing the impact and erosion power of the river. Many pits shaped like skulls or cartoon figures are geological marks formed where several swirling currents met and slowly wore down the rock over extremely long periods of time. The Great Blue Hole off the coast of Belize is often called an open grave of the Caribbean, a massive ocean sinkhole where experienced divers have died because of gas poisoning and deep water hallucinations. At a depth of 295 feet, exists a thick toxic gas cloud acting like a gateway to hell, completely separating the clear blue water above from the oxygen-deprived dead water zone below. The massive pressure here is so brutal that it causes humans to suffer nitrogen narcosis and manually remove breathing gear to laugh unconsciously right before being swallowed forever by the black hole. To touch the bottom for just a few short minutes, divers must gamble their lives hovering for hours at decompression stops so their bodies are not destroyed by ocean pressure during ascent. Because the bottom of the hole has no oxygen, the bodies of the unfortunate ones are not eaten by fish or decomposed, but lie intact in their wetsuits amidst toxic mud for decades. The Danakil Desert is the lethal wasteland holding the title of the hottest, constantly inhabited place on the planet. In Ethiopia's Danakil Depression, the village of Hamadella stands as a staggering testament to human endurance, where families have clung to traditional huts for generations. Perched directly atop a massive salt flat, with temperatures frequently soaring above 122 degrees Fahrenheit, this is one of the hottest and most extreme inhabited places on Earth. The sweltering heat is so intense that tires can explode from over-expanded air, while electronics often shut down or have plastic parts melt after just 10 minutes of direct sun exposure. Just beyond the doorsteps lies a surreal landscape featuring bubbling neon green acid pools and geysers that relentlessly shoot scalding water into the sky. Despite neighboring volcanoes spewing toxic gases, resilient miners continue to carve white salt blocks to form camel caravans, transporting white gold across this literal living hell. Cano Cristales is a wild river buried deep within the primal jungles of Colombia and holds the undisputed title of the most vibrant river in the entire world. Beyond any visual illusion, this river truly erupts with 5 violent colors, including bright red, yellow, green, blue, and black, right beneath its deceptive crystal-clear waters. However, the existence of this beauty is so brutally fragile that even a single drop of chemicals from a human is enough to instantly suffocate and wither the entire magnificent colored carpet. Despite being filled with millions of cubic feet of water so pure it is frightening, this is a lethal dead zone for fish because the riverbed is nothing but barren rock without a single grain of mud for survival. This explosion of color only occurs in a brief moment, because if the rain is too heavy, the fierce currents will sweep everything away, or if the sun exceeds 100 degrees, the entire ecosystem will be completely incinerated. Most terrifyingly, this beauty lies deep within a forbidden zone, torn apart by decades of civil war, where hidden minefields still wait to swallow any reckless soul who dares to trespass. Tumpak Sewu in Indonesia is not a peaceful attraction, but is often called one of the most dangerous curtain waterfalls in the Indonesian. At the bottom lies a narrow, semicircular basin locked in by steep sedimentary walls rising close to 300 feet, where the thunder of falling water can completely drown out warning sounds from upstream. Mount Semeru is among the most persistently active volcanoes on Earth, with eruptions recorded in 74 of the past 80 years, and since 2014, it has released ash almost daily, with plumes rising as high as about 7.5 miles. The valleys below the waterfall system, including the basin around Tumpak Sewu, repeatedly receive volcanic mudflows whenever heavy rain combines with eruptive activity from the mountain. In 1981, a major mudflow destroyed 26 villages and killed at least 251 people. And in December 2021, another collapse of volcanic material swept away thousands of homes. Despite the constant danger, many workers still collect volcanic sand in the dry riverbeds nearby, where a sudden roar from Semeru may leave them only 10 to 15 minutes to escape the incoming mud flow. Don't let the beauty of Monument Valley fool you, because it is actually one of the most brutal survival traps in America, with red rock towers as tall as 100-story buildings. In the heart of a modern nation, thousands of indigenous people still live without power or running water, while facing daily dust storms carrying deadly radioactive uranium dust. You will be tortured by insane weather, where 104-degree Fahrenheit daytime heat suddenly drops to 0 degrees at night, leaving your body completely exhausted. The scariest part is how heavy rains turn the ground into a slippery mud that swallows tires before hardening like solid concrete to trap you forever in the middle of nowhere. They choose to risk their lives and give up modern comforts to protect their faith and roots on this bone-dry but proud stretch of earth. Milford Sound is recognized as the 8th wonder of the world and holds the record as one of the wettest places on the planet, with massive amounts of rainfall throughout the year. The brutality of nature here is shown through vertical cliffs rising over 3,000 feet, straight from the sea into the sky, creating a suffocating limestone labyrinth. When storms sweep through, thousands of temporary waterfalls crash down from the peaks with terrifying pressure, enough to sweep away all vegetation and trigger violent landslides. The landscape is so absurd that the surface water mixes freezing glacial freshwater with salty seawater, creating a permanent dark zone where deep-sea creatures must rise to the surface to survive. The harshness also comes from aggressive sandflies ready to attack any living being, and gale-force winds that can literally lift the ocean surface into the air. Milford Sound is not just a grand landscape, but a completely isolated natural fortress where humans become tiny and helpless against the power of nature. Iguazu Falls is a massive fracture that split the Paraná volcanic plateau, where hundreds of waterfalls combine into a system whose water flow can surge up to 30 times after only a few days of heavy rain. In this environment, the great dusky swift has chosen a suicidal survival strategy by diving through water walls with enough pressure to crush human ribs to nest in eternal darkness and 100% humidity. Maintenance workers and rangers stubbornly cling to these slippery cliff edges because it remains the only source of income, allowing them to survive within this treacherous and remote borderland. The brutality extends to biological traps like the sandbox tree, armed with poisonous spikes and exploding seed pods that fire like shrapnel, capable of piercing thick flesh in an instant. The most horrifying reality lies within the devil's throat, where hydraulic pressure pins and churns a victim's body against the bottom for days until the violent currents tear them apart before washing the remains miles downstream. Trolltunga, also known as the Troll Tongue, is a suspended rock platform hanging above one of the highest unprotected cliff drops in northern Europe. The ledge projects from a vertical cliff about 2,300 feet above the valley, where the distance between a perfect photograph and a fatal fall is often just a single slip on smooth rock. Although it appears permanent, the formation continues to erode under thousands of years of ice pressure and extreme weather, which slowly makes the surface more unstable. Danger also comes from sudden wind gusts rising from the deep lake below, which can push a standing adult off balance within seconds. Dense whiteout storms can erase visibility in minutes, turning the entire cliff edge into a disorienting maze where every direction leads toward the drop. More than 40 rescue operations occur here each year, and when weather conditions worsen, helicopters often cannot fly, forcing rescue teams to hike for hours through cold mountain terrain to reach injured visitors. The Faroe Islands are home to the village of Iguazu, which holds the title of one of the most isolated and treacherous settlements on the international stage. Perched precariously on cliffs rising over 1,300 feet above sea level, this tiny hamlet houses fewer than 12 families, facing the constant fury of North Atlantic storms. The most defining feature of this land is a massive waterfall, plunging directly from the backyards of houses into the roaring ocean, creating a fragile boundary between a cozy home and the void of the abyss. Before a mountain tunnel was opened in 2004, residents had to gamble their lives by hiking over towering peaks in dense fog, or traveling by boat through violent waters that frequently sank vessels. Even the local sheep have adapted to these extreme conditions by casually grazing at the very edge of the precipice, while powerful gale-force winds constantly threaten to sweep away all traces of life. Iguazu serves as the ultimate embodiment of resilient survival as humans cling to the edge of the world to confront the most violent forces of nature. Known as the masterpiece of the gods, Geiranger Fjord is actually a brutal, natural trap hidden between vertical cliffs, rising like the ramparts of hell. This place nurses the Okhaneset monster, where a death crack silently splits the mountain every day, waiting to dump millions of tons of rock to trigger a massive wall of water as tall as a 30-story building. The brutality is felt through a desperate race for survival, where the entire village will be erased under pitch-black water before the sirens even stop. The most terrifying story lies with the past farmers who had to tether their children with ropes to keep them from being blown into the abyss right in their own yards. In winter, this landmark turns into an isolated icy prison as avalanches bury every road and transform canyons into giant wind tunnels. The Anatolian Devili, once a volcanic lake system 39 feet deep, has now evaporated completely in just 2 decades to reveal a cruel mineral graveyard. Under the scorching heat, the lakebed turns into a thick puddle of blood-red mud as extreme bacteria multiply and emit the foul stench of chemical decomposition. This cracked surface instantly transforms into a storm, generating machine-blowing, highly corrosive alkaline salt dust that devastates the lungs of all living things. Even more terrifying, the hollow land surrounding it hides over 2,500 giant sinkholes as deep as a 15-story building, ready to tear the ground open without any warning tremors. Despite the impending swallowing disaster, farmers still gamble their lives, drilling wells hundreds of feet deep through the decaying limestone bedrock to scavenge water for planting. The price of that stubbornness is sudden horrific tragedies, when both humans and tractors weighing tons are abruptly swallowed by a 131-foot deep black hole, burying the bodies forever in the deep abyss. The town of Civita di Bagnoregio in Italy holds the title of the world's most famous dying city as it perches atop a volcanic rock plateau that is literally crumbling away. Located precariously in a valley at an elevation of over 1,300 feet, the fragile, tough stone structure is vanishing into thin air after every winter storm or harsh earthquake. Ancient walls and historic houses frequently collapse into the abyss because the foundations erode at a rate of nearly 3 inches every year. Today, fewer than 12 residents remain in a state of eternal farewell, as the living space beneath their feet continues to shrink significantly. The only way to access this lonely world is a footbridge stretching over 1,000 feet across a deep canyon, acting as a fragile lifeline connecting the past to the void. Civita di Bagnoregio serves as an extreme symbol of human presence, as people refuse to abandon the final fragments of their disappearing home. Imagine standing before Dettifoss, a massive wall of water stretching wide, where the ground beneath your feet trembles violently under the raw force of nature. Hidden deep within Iceland's most dramatic canyon, this waterfall does not carry a clear blue color, but instead holds a murky gray tone formed by ancient glacial sediment ground over thousands of years. The sheer power of the flow at Dettifoss creates towering clouds of white mist that rise high and can be seen from several miles away. This immense pressure continuously erodes the solid rock walls, causing the entire waterfall to slowly retreat upstream at an average rate of about 1.5 feet per year. Within this raw landscape, sunlight often pierces through the dense mist to form bright, double rainbows stretching across the vast terrain. On the eastern side of the falls, the complete absence of safety barriers allows the most daring individuals to stand right at the edge and face the violent beauty and endless roar of the earth. It may sound unbelievable, but Paricutin in Mexico is the only volcano on Earth whose entire life cycle was witnessed by modern humans from its sudden birth to its quiet end. Everything began as a small crack, releasing sulfur gas in a farmer's cornfield. Yet within the first 24 hours, the eruption threw out ash and rock and grew to nearly 164 feet before rising into a volcano about 1,100 feet tall after a single year. Lava from the crater spread outward and buried the town of San Juan Parangaricutiro beneath layers of molten rock across more than about 10 square miles of land. When the lava finally cooled, the entire town lay hidden under sharp black basalt that can cut through thick boots like broken glass. In the middle of this frozen lava desert, the bell tower of the San Juan Capistrano Church still rises alone, marking the exact place where a living town once stood. During the years of eruption, lava hotter than 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit killed no one. But 3 people in the region died when volcanic lightning formed inside ash clouds and struck the ground. Raja Ampat is an impossible death zone, holding the record for extreme isolation and the most violent natural forces on the planet. To reach this sea at the very edge of the world, you must endure a grueling journey spanning several days and nights on small boats, crossing desolate waters without a single soul in sight. The force of nature here is incredibly violent, with currents in the narrow gaps between limestone islands capable of sweeping a professional diver away for miles in just a few brief seconds. You will be overwhelmed by thousands of limestone cliffs standing at a 90-degree angle and sharp as razors, always ready to shred the hull of any boat daring enough to approach. Upon entering the deep center, all advanced devices become useless bricks as cell service and GPS signals are completely neutralized among the towering ridges. This place remains a mysterious blind spot for humanity, with hundreds of islands and underwater caves that have never appeared on a map or felt the touch of a human footprint. Known as the Stone Fortress of the Pacific, the Diamond Head system holds the record as one of the most perfect and famous volcanic tuff cones on the planet. With a massive basin structure completely lacking shade trees, it turns into a sweltering oven that blocks all cooling trade winds from the ocean. The brutality of the terrain is shown through rugged trails filled with loose gravel and choking dust, ready to cause injury to anyone without professional gear. To reach the summit, at over 560 feet, you must conquer steep staircases that drain your energy under the scorching sun, causing hundreds of people to collapse every year. The harshness is proven by the heavy rescue frequency, with an average of more than 10 emergency calls every month, and helicopters constantly circling to pull heat-stroke victims out of the crater. This is truly a brutal fitness test, where the annual casualty numbers are living proof of the danger hidden behind the paradise beauty. Studlagil is not a natural masterpiece, but an exposed basalt spike trap holding the record as Iceland's densest and most brutal hexagonal column formation. Before 2007, the monstrous Jökulá River carried and dumped 130 tons of mud and rock into the ocean every hour, ready to crush any creature falling into its violent silt flow. The deceptively beautiful turquoise water is actually a lethal trap, maintaining temperatures between 33 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit, causing the respiratory system to seize and muscles to freeze in less than 3 minutes. Despite facing isolation and deadly peril, Jökuldalur Valley farmers have desperately clung to this land for centuries because the pastures feeding their sheep are the only assets keeping them alive through winter. This persistence has been paid for, with chilling tragedies where the river's roar drowned out the screams of those who slipped, causing them to vanish forever into the deep canyon depths. Now that the flow is choked, the canyon stands like a magnificent skeleton, yet it still waits to claim the lives of anyone careless enough to step on its grease-slick moss. Known as the city swallowed by rock, Petra holds the record as the most insane architectural achievement of the ancient world. Construction here was a life-or-death gamble, with no chance for error, as workers had to hang suspended at deadly heights to chisel the mountain face from top to bottom with absolute precision. To enter this magnificent city, you must pass through a natural deep crevice, with vertical walls rising hundreds of feet high, creating the sensation that the giant mountain is about to collapse and crush any intruder. In the middle of a scorching desert frying pan, the ancients captured the water monster by hollowing out the mountains to create a massive underground drainage system to tame destructive flash floods and turn deadly water into luxurious gardens. Stepping out of the dark canyon, you will feel as small as an ant before massive facades as tall as a 10-story building carved straight into the mountainside with pure madness. The harshness of these natural barriers performed its protective duty so perfectly that desert dust completely swallowed and erased this megacity from human memory for centuries. Choosing to stay at Gioc Falls is a crazy risk, as they build houses right on a giant abyss dividing two countries. This place is like a natural meat grinder, continuously pouring millions of cubic feet of water from over 98 feet high, ready to swallow everything when upstream dams release floods without warning. Under their heels is not solid ground, but deep, empty caves with countless rocks as sharp as razors and wartime mines still sleeping under rotting forest leaves. Despite the bone-chilling wet mist that can quickly rot a tiny scratch, they still risk their lives clinging to the cliffs to plant corn to keep the land left by their ancestors. Anyone who takes a wrong step and falls into that roaring current will immediately be swept across the border, where no rescue team is allowed to cross over and bring them back. Few places in Europe force human settlement inside a natural geological trap like Kotor Bay, where deep water is locked between steep limestone cliffs of the Balkan Mountains. Trapped between the sea and barren mountains, early inhabitants survived by fishing, dangerous maritime trade, and at times piracy to avoid starvation. The towns cling to the base of cliffs along an active fault line that produced a magnitude 6.9 earthquake in 1979, sending huge limestone blocks crashing into the settlements. The only road connecting the bay to the outside world twists through 25 tight hairpin turns, carved directly into the cliff, where vehicles must pass beside a steep drop without guardrails. In the quiet water of the bay stands a small island covered with dark cypress trees, where a monastery and cemetery hold victims of epidemics, earthquakes, and violent deaths from the region's past. Far from a static lake surface, Plitvice is actually a living limestone labyrinth with the fastest terrain consumption and regeneration speed on the planet. Beneath the eerily crystal-clear water lies a surreal graveyard where intense minerals instantly petrify and forever imprison any organism that sinks to the deep bottom. The entire lake surface acts like a monster's eye, constantly shifting colors from ash gray to brilliant turquoise in just hours due to billions of swirling bacteria. During brutal winters, massive waterfalls suddenly freeze into thousands of razor-sharp ice swords weighing tons, hanging overhead like a death trap. Violent underground currents can turn into water bombs that tear through cliffs and level century-old natural dams after just one night of melting ice. Halong Bay is actually a deadly battlefield with over 1,900 giant limestone blades forming the most complex submerged sea maze in the world. Millions of tons of rock hang precariously over eroded alcoves, constantly threatening to fracture and crush any living soul daring to enter the dark cave crevices. The brutality also comes from air currents squeezed through narrow canyons, creating immense pressure strong enough to lift and tear apart any floating rafts. In desperate struggle, humans here must face the tidal trap that rises 13 feet to seal cave entrances and drain the oxygen of those trapped within just a few short hours. Surrounded by nothing but salt water, finding a single drop of fresh water is harder and more precious than gold, forcing people to give up every basic need just to stay alive. During long storms, families have sometimes been forced to keep the body of a deceased relative on their raft for days until the sea becomes calm enough to reach the shore. Itbizo Canyon is a basalt fracture about 2,360 feet deep, where a single slip can turn a human body into shattered remains on the canyon floor. In less than 3 minutes, a weather event called Vivaco Sound can pull dense ocean fog into the canyon and erase visibility from many miles to zero, turning the cliff edge into a hidden, deadly trap. At the bottom flows the Rio do Boi, or River of the Cattle, where for centuries animals blinded by fog or frightened by predators have plunged from the cliffs, their bodies smashed against rock, and the river below turning into a drifting graveyard stained with blood. Despite the danger, ranchers and explorers still return here, drawn by grazing land and by the harsh landscape carved across the plateau. When accidents occur, violent winds often prevent helicopters from landing, and rescue teams may spend nearly an entire day descending on foot, only to find faint traces of the victims at the canyon floor. Verdon Gorge is often described as the Great Scar of Europe, where the continent appears split open by a limestone canyon nearly 2,300 feet deep, with sheer vertical walls. To imagine the scale, you would need to stack more than 2 Eiffel Towers to reach from the bottom of the Verdon River to the rim above. In several narrow sections, the river does not simply flow along the surface, but disappears into underground channels and limestone caves, forming hidden sinkholes and water passages. High above the cliffs, griffon vultures with wingspans close to 10 feet glide on warm air rising from the canyon depths. Modern hydroelectric dams regulate the river, yet sudden water releases can quickly raise the level inside narrow passages, turning calm sections into violent torrents. Because of the extreme terrain, the canyon floor remained almost untouched by humans until 1905, when the first expedition finally crossed it after several wooden boats were smashed against the rock walls. Marina Bay Sands is an expensive engineering gamble where a massive architectural complex must stand on the soft, reclaimed land of Marina Bay in Singapore. Because this ground is not solid rock, the structure, weighing hundreds of thousands of tons, sits on more than 500 hydraulic jacks placed deep underground to keep the 3 towers balanced as the soil slowly settles. This constant movement also affects the infinity pool, nearly 650 feet above ground, which holds about 396,000 gallons of water and is divided into 3 sections, so it can adapt to the different motion of the towers in strong winds. The pool's sections are connected by special expansion joints, allowing the structure to move about 10 inches while keeping the concrete and water systems stable. Outside the building, large glass surfaces absorb intense equatorial sunlight, so powerful central cooling systems must run continuously to maintain comfortable temperatures inside. Humans always choose places where survival is easier, but in the harshest environments, their adaptability reveals no limits. There, survival is not a given, but a constant process of endurance against a hostile environment. Some communities live in lands without a stable water source, where every drop becomes a resource for survival. In some places, extreme cold or heat can kill a person in a very short time if they become careless and underestimate it. And beyond Earth, aboard space stations, humans must drink recycled urine to stay alive. These places are proof that the limits of nature are exactly where human adaptability begins. In Hong Kong, one of the most modern and expensive cities in the world, there still exists an extreme form of housing known as coffin homes. The name comes from the reality that once the door is closed, the space inside becomes as cramped and suffocating as a coffin, while an apartment of about 430 square feet can be divided into up to 20 tiny sleeping units. The harshness becomes clear when elderly residents have died alone inside these boxes and were only discovered days later, while others continue to eat and sleep beside those same partitions because they have nowhere else to go. For many residents, the box gradually becomes their entire world, where they live in isolation, depression, and rely only on a phone screen or a small television as their sole controlled connection. The sanitation conditions are even more extreme, as in some subdivided units, toilets are placed directly next to cooking areas due to the lack of space. Waste odors, food smells, and damp air are trapped inside rooms with almost no windows, creating a toxic environment that slowly erodes both physical health and mental stability. Living on the ISS is one of the most extreme survival environments humans have ever created for themselves. Would you drink a cup of coffee that was once your own urine? With systems that recycle 93% of liquids from sweat, breath, and wastewater, it becomes a significant psychological challenge, even though the processed water is cleaner than tap water. Using the toilet is also a demanding process, as astronauts must strap themselves in place and rely on vacuum suction to keep waste from floating in microgravity. The most critical challenge is the effect on the human body, as without about 2 hours of daily exercise, bones lose density due to calcium loss through urine, and the heart can shrink because it works less in microgravity. On the ISS, every sip of water and every movement requires constant effort to adapt to conditions beyond Earth. It is a technological achievement, but also an extreme biological environment. In the heart of Iran, the Lut Desert appears like a massive natural furnace where life becomes an extreme rarity. Ground temperatures here are so intense that expeditions have reported glue in thin-soled shoes melting, with heat radiating upward enough to blister feet almost instantly. But the real danger of Lut is not just the heat, it is how it deceives the human body. In near-zero humidity, sweat evaporates immediately, making people unaware of dehydration, even as their blood thickens rapidly. Walking across Lut at midday without sufficient water can lead to confusion and collapse within a few hours. Even phones, cameras, and temperature devices often shut down or fail completely, as if in Lut, even machines cannot withstand the conditions. Makoko is not just a floating slum, it is a place where people live each day, surrounded by pollution, instability, and the constant fear of being erased at any moment. Most of this settlement is built on wooden stilts driven into the Lagos Lagoon, but the water below is not a resource. It is a thick, black layer filled with garbage, sewage, and household waste discharged directly beneath the homes. In this environment, disease becomes part of daily life, with estimates suggesting that up to 40% of children under 5 suffer from water-related illnesses such as diarrhea, typhoid, and dengue fever each year. But the deepest scar of Makoko is not in the water, it lies in the collective memory of the 2012 eviction. Residents were given only 72 hours to leave, and when authorities returned, they cut down the support structures, destroying entire lifetimes of possessions within minutes. Since then, the sight of police boats is enough to push the entire community into a state of extreme alert and fear. On Mount Huashan, people do not buy a normal visit. They buy the chance to step onto the edge of death at heights above 6,500 feet. What is called a path here is actually a few narrow wooden planks fixed directly into a near vertical cliff, so thin that you do not truly walk, but must press your chest against the cold rock and move inch by inch with empty space behind you. Because it is a dead end, fear reaches its peak when those going out and those returning must face each other on the narrow edge, where two strangers almost have to hold each other closely to pass, with one pressed to the rock and the other leaning toward the drop. A single loss of balance can turn the entire situation into a disaster. Even with safety harnesses, the sound of 700-year-old wooden planks creaking underfoot in strong winds becomes intense psychological strain. Many people freeze in place, gripping iron chains until their hands bleed, unable to move forward or backward, leaving their lives to their final reserve of courage. L-Jimo is considered one of the most dangerous lighthouses in the world because it stands alone in waters that were once a graveyard for ships off the coast of France. This place is harsh because even a granite rock, standing about 131 feet tall, can shake and sway like a toy. When storms arrive, massive waves do not just crash against the tower, but completely engulf it, while inside, the impacts sound like metal explosions, and the floors shake hard enough to throw objects out of place. Lighthouse keepers once lived with the constant fear that the structure could be torn from its foundation at any moment. The peak of this brutality was recorded in 1989 when a keeper stepped outside and a towering wall of water rose behind him, and he survived only by slamming the steel door shut in time. That may be why L-Jimo was fully automated in 1991, and since then, no one has had to spend the night inside this tower surrounded by the ocean. The Tateyama-Kurobe Alpine route is known as the White Death Road of the Japanese Alps, holding the world record for the heaviest snowfall in a temperate region. From February, engineering teams begin reopening the route through snow that can reach depths of 65 feet, where bulldozer operators at times cannot tell whether they are on the road or drifting toward a drop of hundreds of feet. In that endless white environment, they rely on satellite GPS and tall markers placed during the previous autumn, because even a small mistake in handling the machines can trigger avalanches that bury entire crews. But the danger does not end with the clearing phase, as visitors can move from about 77 degrees Fahrenheit at the base to 23 degrees Fahrenheit at Morodo within a single hour. This rapid shift in temperature and pressure is enough to cause fainting or serious complications for those who are unprepared. Even in May, a sudden snowstorm can erase visibility completely, turning a walk of a few hundred yards back to the station into a distance that can lead to death from hypothermia. Yanjing is one of the most primitive and harsh salt-producing locations on the planet, and the only place that still maintains manual salt crystallization on cliffside terraces. Along the mountainside beside the Lancang River, more than 3,000 clay salt pans are supported by tens of thousands of wooden poles, forming a suspended structure like a giant honeycomb clinging to the air. This unlikely system operates entirely by human effort, as local women carry loads of 110 to 130 pounds of brine every day, climbing hundreds of steep steps from the riverbank up to the evaporation terraces. The uniqueness of Yanjing lies in the fact that although the water comes from the same river, the western bank produces mineral-rich pink salt, while the eastern bank yields pure white salt. The Lancang River both sustains and threatens the village, as floodwaters from June to September submerge all the wells near the banks. When the water recedes, the red mud left behind often destroys the fragile structures, forcing residents to rebuild almost entirely from scratch. Novaya Zemlya lies in isolation among the frozen seas of the Arctic, where people must survive in an environment that nature still controls completely. In 2019, the town of Belushia Guba, with a population of 3,000, was forced to send an urgent distress signal during a mass invasion of 52 aggressive polar bears. These white giants were no longer afraid of gunfire, and they boldly charged into public buildings, offices, and chased residents through the streets in search of food. As climate change caused the ice to melt earlier, the bears were pushed to the edge and began to treat the settlement and its people as survival targets, driving the situation to a red alert extreme. The crisis became so severe that children were too afraid to go to school, while parents had to use armored vehicles to take them across roads that humans no longer truly controlled. Even with their lives under immediate threat, the residents remained helpless because the law strictly forbade shooting these protected animals, creating a brutal contradiction between people and nature. Would you risk your life on 4 inches? At Ling Paishi in China, the margin of error is not measured in meters, but in lives. This is a road where insurance companies would refuse you immediately, and where even a single sneeze could become your final action. The entire route is essentially a crude path with no guardrails, just wide enough for a car to squeeze through between a vertical rock wall on one side and a deep drop on the other. The pressure is so intense that many inexperienced drivers freeze halfway, unable to press the gas or the brake, their hands shaking until they completely lose control. There have been cases where drivers abandoned their vehicles in the middle of the road and waited for others to come rescue them, as fear of height can shut down the entire nervous system within minutes. And when fog, snow, or heavy rain covers the 18 turns, the surface becomes as slippery as grease, and visibility drops to nearly zero, turning Ling Paishi into a true survival gamble. Mount Merapi is described as a place where people live beside a ticking bomb with no countdown clock. On average, this volcano produces a major eruption every 5 to 10 years, while smaller activities occur almost every year, meaning the instability here never truly ends. What makes it more dangerous is that Merapi is extremely difficult to predict, to the point that even modern seismic systems sometimes provide only minutes of warning before a disaster. After the 2010 eruption, entire villages were buried under layers of ash several feet thick, and instead of erasing that memory, residents preserved the remains as a record of the event. The greatest paradox of Merapi is that the same force that destroys lives is also what keeps people here. Volcanic ash is rich in minerals, turning the surrounding land into one of the most fertile agricultural zones in Indonesia, where farmers can harvest rice up to 3 times per year. A single slight turn of the steering wheel on Kemelietas Yolu is enough to turn this road into a death sentence along the cliffs of Turkey. This notorious stone route passes through 38 tunnels with no lighting and no ventilation, where rough rock walls press so close to the vehicle that drivers feel as if the mountain is closing in on them. Right beside the tires is a drop of about 1,970 feet with no guardrails at all, while the road itself is only about 6.5 feet wide, making every movement forward accompanied by constant signals of panic from the human body. Once inside the deeper tunnel sections, vehicles can barely turn around, leaving the only options to continue forward or reverse for miles along the cliff edge. Ironically, after the road was completed in 2002, the government built a safer, paved route on the other side of the mountain. As a result, this place stands both as a source of local pride and as a monument to 132 years of labor and danger spent creating a symbol that the modern world no longer truly needs. Seda appears as a sea of red wooden rooftops covering entire hillsides, where tens of thousands of people crowd into a narrow valley to live a monastic life almost completely cut off from modern comforts. Each small house measures only about 54 to 108 square feet, yet it serves as a place to sleep, cook, and pray, compressing the entire living space into an extreme density. This crowding is not a sign of poor architecture, but a deliberate choice to abandon material life and maintain absolute focus on spiritual practice. But when so many people exist within a system lacking modern infrastructure, daily life becomes harsh, especially in winter, when waste freezes almost instantly and monks must walk miles in temperatures dropping to -13 degrees Fahrenheit to collect water or use public toilets. The risk of fire is constant, as cheap wooden houses are packed so tightly that a single fallen candle can burn down an entire hillside. Even so, many refuse to move to more modern housing, because for them, isolation and hardship are the core of monastic life. Devil's Pool is one of the most dangerous natural infinity pools on Earth because it sits right at the edge of Victoria Falls. When you enter the water here, you are swimming at a height of about 354 feet, equivalent to the edge of a 40-story building with no protection from the drop below. The most extreme detail is that a single natural rock ledge is all that holds your body in place before massive volumes of water plunge into the mist-filled chasm beneath. Lying against the rock, hearing the roar of millions of gallons of water, and looking into the white void below creates a level of psychological pressure that is rarely experienced anywhere else. A single mistake, a careless movement, or a delayed reaction can lead to consequences beyond recovery. Naser is considered the most dangerous arena in the world for surfers because the ocean here hides a massive wave-generating system beneath the surface. Below this coastline lies the Naser Canyon, stretching about 143 miles and reaching depths of 16,400 feet. A structure large enough to channel, concentrate, and accelerate ocean energy before it crashes toward the shore. When powerful storms arrive, currents within the canyon meet shallow waters on the continental shelf, causing wave layers to stack and rise into walls of water reaching up to 98 feet. At this scale, a fall is no longer a sporting accident, but resembles a direct collision with a collapsing mass of water. Many athletes have left Nazaré with broken bones, spinal injuries, ruptured eardrums, or unconsciousness in the middle of violent seas. In January 2023, the extreme nature of this place reached a critical point when Brazilian surfing legend Marcio Freire died after a severe wipeout, marking the first professional surfer fatality at this location. Tawi Tawi is considered the last stronghold of the Bajo Sea nomads, where entire communities live on floating villages and spend most of their lives on the water. The cost of this lifestyle is visible on their bodies, as constant exposure to salt and intense sunlight turns the hair of many children into shades of blonde or reddish tones, while their skin remains damp and prone to fungal infections. The greatest paradox is that despite living in the ocean, the Bajau often lack fresh water, forcing them to wait for rain or travel long distances to trade fish for water, making their lives entirely dependent on natural conditions. Tawi Tawi also lies along the path of powerful typhoons in the Philippines, meaning floating homes can be destroyed and boats can be sunk at any time. As a result, the Bajau adapt to a cycle of losing and rebuilding, sinking and constructing again, as a repeated pattern of survival. Even in death, isolation continues, as many families must take their relatives to remote islands for burial, where ocean waves can gradually reclaim the graves back into the sea. The Sundarbans is not only the largest mangrove forest in the world, but a saltwater maze where every threat can move. This region holds one of the highest densities of Bengal tigers, and what makes it more dangerous is that these tigers do not avoid humans, but treat them as prey, swimming across rivers and entering villages at night to hunt livestock and people. The danger does not come only from tigers, as the landscape itself constantly shifts, with 2 daily tidal surges rising up to about 16 feet, reshaping the entire forest. Some islands, such as Goramara, are gradually disappearing from maps, forcing residents to relocate repeatedly like early climate refugees. In this environment, saltwater crocodiles over 16 feet long and venomous snakes can appear at the water's edge, on low branches or inside fishing nets, turning every step into a real risk. When the water recedes, it leaves behind mud flats deeper than knee level, so dense that once trapped, escape becomes nearly impossible without assistance. Los Caracoles is one of the most dangerous mountain passes in the Andes, where 29 tight hairpin turns are stacked along a steep mountainside. This extreme concentration of sharp curves has earned it the name the Snail Road of Death, especially since many sections have little to no guardrails, leaving each meter of road as a thin boundary between tires and a deep drop. Many drivers say the most disturbing moment is not entering the turn, but when the front of the truck has cleared the curve, while the trailer is still hanging over the edge, as if the entire vehicle has not yet escaped danger. Many who pass through here for the first time swear they will never return, yet paradoxically, this narrow and steep route remains a critical transport link, connecting Chile and Argentina with heavy container trucks. When snowstorms arrive, visibility can drop to nearly zero within a very short time. There have been historical traffic standstills when sudden snowstorms trapped hundreds of people at the mountain pass, in temperatures falling to -4 degrees Fahrenheit. Gansbai is known as the Great White Shark Capital of the world, one of the most dangerous coastlines on the planet, with one of the highest predator densities ever recorded. Located between Daya Island and Geyser Rock, Shark Alley forms a deadly corridor where 60,000 seals become targets for relentless ambushes. In cold waters with limited visibility, great white sharks launch from the depths at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour to break through the surface. Here, the line between life and death is separated only by a thin steel cage. A single mistake is enough for the ocean to remind humans that they are never the dominant force in waters where there is no room for mercy. Poveglia is often called the most cursed island in the world, or a haunted island. During the time of the plague, around 160,000 bodies were brought here in such numbers that burial became impossible, forcing continuous mass cremations in large pits, and over centuries, the ashes merged into the soil. Some estimates suggest that nearly half of the island's surface layer is made up of human ash, effectively turning the entire area into an open-air burial ground. In the 1920s, the extremity shifted into another form when the island's psychiatric hospital became associated with crude lobotomy procedures using hammers, chisels, and drills on conscious patients. The isolation of the island meant that what happened inside was rarely heard and almost never controlled. Today, even without considering any ghost stories, the decaying structures, broken floors, collapsing ceilings, and mold-filled air make stepping onto Poveglia a real physical risk. Aogashima functions like a refuge, placed directly inside an active geological system that has never truly gone dormant in the Pacific Ocean. This island is not only remote from the mainland, but the entire community lives within a volcanic crater, which is further enclosed by steep walls rising about 650 to 1,300 feet as part of a much larger outer caldera. In 1785, when the Tenmei volcano erupted, around 327 residents were trapped between ash and lava, turning the island into a sealed environment with no easy escape. Even today, that sense of isolation has not disappeared, as helicopters remain the only reliable access, operating just one flight per day with 9 seats and frequently cancelled due to fog or strong winds. For the people living here, waiting for a flight when a family member on the mainland is critically ill is not just a delay, it becomes a prolonged psychological strain. And for those newly assigned to work on the island, the confined space and the closed ring of ocean surrounding Aogashima can quickly turn quietness into a feeling of confinement. Dalol is a place where the highest average annual heat on Earth turns the ground into a geological system almost unfit for life. From above, this volcanic region looks like another planet, as groundwater dissolves salt, sulfur, and iron oxide to form salt towers, small volcanic cones, and vent structures with unusual shapes. Neon green, bright yellow, and vivid orange patches make the landscape appear almost unreal, but in reality, these are boiling acid pools capable of corroding material and causing severe burns after a single contact. In an environment where simply standing under the sun for too long is already a risk, the Afar people still guide camel caravans into this heat basin every day. They use basic tools to cut blocks of salt under temperatures reaching about 122 degrees Fahrenheit, maintaining one of the harshest trade routes in history. In Dalol, dehydration, heat stroke, and exhaustion are not rare risks, and if a person collapses in the middle of the salt field, the chance of survival almost disappears on the spot. The Congo River is a survival corridor where every journey feels like moving directly into the darkest part of the continent. With depths exceeding 720 feet, this river creates a hydrological system where intense water pressure and a complex riverbed generate upwellings and reverse currents powerful enough to overturn large cargo vessels. That force is matched by an ecosystem constantly lying in wait, where crocodiles and hippos are not only present along the banks, but remain a continuous threat to anyone traveling on the water. What makes the Congo more dangerous than many other rivers is its near-total isolation, stretching for hundreds of miles. Both sides of the river are lined with dense primary rainforest, with very few roads and very few modern settlements, and if an accident occurs in these waters, the chance of rescue becomes extremely limited. Fairy Meadows Road does not resemble a typical mountain route, but rather a narrow cut suspended between grey rock and a deep drop above the Indus River. This road was carved by local people using basic hand tools, so it has almost no protective features such as guardrails, asphalt, or warning signs. Many sections are less than 10 feet wide, just enough for a single jeep to pass, with a vertical rock wall on one side and a drop of nearly 6,500 feet into the valley on the other. But the narrowness is not the most dangerous factor, because even light rain or melting snow can loosen limestone from the mountainside, turning each curve into a potential ambush point. At elevations above 10,000 feet, fog can roll in extremely fast and reduce visibility to less than 6 feet. In those conditions, local drivers rely on memory, while visitors are left with little more than hope. If you are drawn to extreme thrills and heart-stopping experiences, the Husseini Hanging Bridge is considered a legend. At times, this bridge stretches for hundreds of feet, yet has fewer than 100 scattered planks remaining, forcing those who cross to take long steps or even small jumps between gaps, while cold, deep water flows below. Strong winds or flooding can tear away, wash out, or damage sections of the bridge in a very short time, keeping the entire structure in a constant state of physical instability. What makes it even more extreme is that this is not an adventure attraction, but a daily route for local residents, including children as young as 6 or 7 years old on their way to school. A single slip or one moment of losing grip on the cables can end everything in mid-air. North Sentinel is not just an isolated island, but a place where the modern world is stopped by a tribe that has rejected all contact for thousands of years. The Sentinelese attack anything that approaches, from boats and helicopters to drones, using bows and spears. For them, there is no difference between aid, research, or missionary work, because any intrusion is treated as a direct threat. On that shoreline, good intentions do not create safety, as anyone who sets foot on the island can face immediate death. The tragedy of John Allen Chau in 2018 stands as a stark example when his attempt at missionary contact ended in his death and his body left on the sand. Even the Indian government has not retrieved the body because any forced approach could cause violence or introduce disease to this isolated community. The Kamchatka Peninsula is known as the living volcano museum of the planet, holding the highest concentration of active volcanoes in the world. Here, people do not just look to the sky to predict rain, they must also watch for ashfall that can blanket entire towns after major eruptions. At times, volcanic ash can block daylight across areas spanning tens of thousands of square miles, turning the surrounding world into a heavy and suffocating gray. But the threat in Kamchatka does not come only from the sky, as the region is also home to more than 20,000 brown bears, one of the highest densities on Earth. They can appear near cemeteries, bus stops, or quiet residential areas, making bear spray or noise flares part of everyday survival habits. Yungas Road is considered the most dangerous road on the planet because its death rate was once extremely high. This road is only about 10 feet wide, clinging to the mountainside and winding alongside cliffs that drop nearly 3,300 feet with almost no protective guardrails. Before a new highway was opened in 2006, North Yungas Road was the only lifeline of the region, forcing daily traffic through a corridor that allowed almost no margin for error. During its most dangerous period, an estimated 200 to 300 people died each year, turning it into a symbol of a transport system that was both essential and deadly. Along the edge of the cliffs, countless crosses and small memorials mark the spots where cars and buses once plunged into the void below. Even without collisions, natural waterfalls pour directly onto the road, creating slippery mud and almost completely eliminating driver visibility. Inside the crater of Kawah Ijen, survival unfolds in dense sulfur gas thick enough to turn each workday into a direct confrontation with death. Local miners carry yellow sulfur loads, weighing up to 198 pounds on their shoulders, moving along steep rocky slopes and paths filled with white toxic fumes with almost no real protective equipment. The toxic gas not only burns the respiratory system, but also erodes tooth enamel, causing many otherwise healthy workers to suffer severe damage at an early age, sometimes before reaching 50 years old. What makes it even more extreme is that they do not have proper masks, relying only on damp cloths over their faces while continuing to work beside an acidic lake capable of destroying nearly all forms of life. Each trip forces their lungs, shoulders, and knees to their limits under heavy loads, violent coughing, and constant exposure to toxic fumes. In Ijen, the greatest fear is not death hanging in the air, but poverty that forces them to return to the crater again the next day. What would you do if a cliff lay ahead, wind roared behind you, and the only voice you could hear was your own shadow? Welcome to L-Jimo, a place known for a strange curse where few people can remain for more than 48 hours. There are no official restrictions, but the harsh conditions are enough to break the will of almost anyone. On L-Jimo, silence does not exist, replaced instead by the constant roar of the ocean, crashing against the cliffs 24 hours a day. After 2 days, this continuous white noise can begin to create auditory hallucinations, making it seem as if voices are calling your name through the wind. The absolute isolation becomes deeply unsettling, as once the boat disappears, you realize there is no immediate way back if something goes wrong. Psychologists consider this an example of extreme social isolation, where the brain loses its sense of time stretching a single day into what feels like endless duration, while the fear of being forgotten begins to take over the mind. If you think your life is already hard enough, look at the urban hells on Earth, where daily existence becomes miserable and almost impossible to endure. Cities abandoned after disasters caused by human hands. Settlements that grew out of garbage, violence, poverty, and disorder. And communities still clinging to isolated, polluted, fragile places, pushed to the very edge of survival. But amid those ruins, many people still do not leave, or simply have nowhere else to go. Again and again, humanity has pushed itself to the brink of destruction, only to learn how to survive on the very wounds it created. Manshiat Naser is a place where garbage does not stay outside the city, but flows directly into homes, meals, and the air people breathe each day. The boundary between residential blocks and landfill areas nearly disappears as thick black leachate seeps into walls, runs across floors, and the smell of rotting organic waste and burning plastic fills the living space. Many families continue daily life and eat beside piles of trash, being sorted, surrounded by flies and rats that remain constantly present. Although Egypt is associated with the Nile River, clean water here is scarce, as many residents rely on contaminated sources containing bacteria and heavy metals, leading to high rates of cancer and hepatitis B and C. In Hong Kong, one of the most modern and expensive cities in the world, there still exists an extreme form of housing known as coffin homes. The name comes from the reality that once the door is closed, the space inside becomes as cramped and suffocating as a coffin, while an apartment of about 430 square feet can be divided into up to 20 tiny sleeping units. The harshness becomes clear when elderly residents have died alone inside these boxes and were only discovered days later, while others continue to eat and sleep beside those same partitions because they have nowhere else to go. For many residents, the box gradually becomes their entire world, where they live in isolation, depression, and rely only on a phone screen or a small television as their sole controlled connection. The sanitation conditions are even more extreme, as in some subdivided units, toilets are placed directly next to cooking areas due to the lack of space. Waste odors, food smells, and damp air are trapped inside rooms with almost no windows, creating a toxic environment that slowly erodes both physical health and mental stability. Pripyat is the mass grave of the Soviet technological dream, a city frozen forever in the moment of human error. On the night of 1986, reactor number 4 exploded, releasing a wave of toxic radiation 400 times stronger than the Hiroshima atomic bomb, and turning this city into an invisible dead zone. In the panic, 50,000 people were driven from their homes with only 3 hours to prepare, leaving behind unfinished meals and broken childhoods. The lies of the authorities turned them into sacrificial victims, spreading the pain of cancer, deformities, and genetic consequences that lasted for many years afterward. The most haunting symbol of the city is the rusted Ferris wheel, prepared to open on May 1st, but never used even once. With a sentence of 12,427 miles of isolation in time, equal to 20,000 years, this is a cursed land where life was erased forever by human arrogance and error. Tornado Alley is a deadly arena in the heart of America, where the sky turns into a real monster in just 15 minutes. Here, massive storms create the most powerful tornadoes with terrifying winds above 200 miles per hour. At that speed, the air becomes as sharp as a blade, turning the smallest speck of dust into a bullet that can pierce through everything. The most terrifying part is how suddenly it can change its nature. An ordinary tornado can suddenly swell to a width of 2.6 miles, enough to swallow an entire town and even the most experienced storm chasers. It works like a giant vacuum cleaner, pulling thousands of tons of dirt, rock, water, and even frogs and fish high into the atmosphere. These things freeze solid and then crash back to the ground like muddy meteors the size of grapefruits, creating the horrifying sight of frog rain punching through rooftops. Makoko is not just a floating slum, it is a place where people live each day, surrounded by pollution, instability, and the constant fear of being erased at any moment. Most of this settlement is built on wooden stilts driven into the Lagos Lagoon, But the water below is not a resource. It is a thick, black layer filled with garbage, sewage, and household waste discharged directly beneath the homes. In this environment, disease becomes part of daily life, with estimates suggesting that up to 40% of children under 5 suffer from water-related illnesses such as diarrhea, typhoid, and dengue fever each year. But the deepest scar of Makoko is not in the water. It lies in the collective memory of the 2012 eviction. Residents were given only 72 hours to leave, and when authorities returned, they cut down the support structures, destroying entire lifetimes of possessions within minutes. Since then, the sight of police boats is enough to push the entire community into a state of extreme alert and fear. At an elevation of 16,732 feet in the Andes, La Rinconada is not made for life. It is made only for greed. In a place where oxygen levels fall to only half of normal, every breath feels like the lungs are screaming against the thin and freezing air. This is a giant kingdom of trash where waste and frozen mud harden into exposed, tumor-like masses. Inside dark tunnels, always on the edge of collapse, thousands of people still dig in a frenzy under the brutal Cacario system, working 30 days without pay for one single day to gamble their fate on a bag of ore. But the real enemy is not only cave-ins, it is mercury vapor, soaked into every mouthful of water, quietly destroying the bodies of the desperate. Amid gunfire, human trafficking, and the absence of law, La Rinconada is a place where order disappears, leaving only the most frenzied survival instinct inside a dead land full of injustice. Pacifica is a place where a house facing the Pacific Ocean can turn from an expensive dream into rubble in just a few weeks. This coastal city is known for homes and apartment buildings perched on cliffs that are being hollowed out from below by ocean waves, making many of them look as if they are hanging over the edge. During the El Niño event in early 2016, heavy surf cut so deeply into the shoreline that authorities had to declare a state of emergency, as some apartments were left completely unsupported and could fall into the ocean at any moment. The cruelest part is that once erosion begins, apartments once worth millions of dollars become almost impossible to sell, and standard insurance usually does not cover this kind of erosion. Instead of enjoying the dream home they worked for, many owners are forced to spend hundreds of thousands of US dollars to hire excavators to demolish their own homes in order to keep debris from polluting the sea. Lake Titicaca is not a place for sightseeing, but a brutal survival arena where every breath is a struggle. This harshness is the true price of freedom. Centuries ago, the ancestors of the Uros people chose to flee the bloody massacres on land and throw themselves into this deadly lake. They wove floating reed islands with their own hands as shelters, but that very decision pushed them into a merciless cycle. Every step brings cold moisture rising from the lake into their bones, wearing down the body with chronic pain. By day, ultraviolet radiation burns the skin like red fire, but the moment the sun disappears, below freezing cold immediately locks all life in ice. When the rage of Mamakota arrives through violent storms and record droughts, the lake pulls back, fish die across the water, and the people are pushed into exhaustion. Now the younger generation is forced to leave in despair, abandoning islands that are slowly sinking into the mud. Paro Taktsang stands as a defiant challenge from nature, perched precariously on a sheer cliff face high among the misty clouds of the Himalayas. At an elevation of more than 10,170 feet, the thin and bitter cold air drains human strength, turning every breath into something heavy and painful. To reach the tiger's nest, people must commit themselves to a deadly path along narrow mountain trails, with massive rock walls on one side and a bottomless abyss on the other, without a single barrier for protection. Here, the extremity begins with a complete separation from the world below. The monks must wrestle life from narrow cracks in the rock, carefully saving each drop of rainwater or melted snow, which can easily freeze solid when winter arrives. Tragedy struck in 1998 when flames from butter lamps erupted and burned everything down, while the impossible terrain left people utterly powerless to stop it. Vivaco Gervasutti is truly not for the faint of heart, because it feels like a deadly cocoon hanging precariously on a cliff nearly 10,000 feet above sea level. To climb up here, you have to gamble with your life for 6 straight hours as you crawl across deep crevasses and steep rock walls. One slip, even the moment you open the door, and you could fall freely into the abyss thousands of feet below your feet. When a snowstorm suddenly hits, this place turns into a suffocating prison in the middle of pitch-black darkness. You have to listen to the ice cracking and roaring right beneath the floor, as if it is about to throw everything into the void. Oxygen is limited, and the skin-cutting cold closes in, while there is not a single person anywhere around you. At Manaslu Base Camp, reaching the campsite means entering the death zone of one of the most extreme mountains on Earth. It serves as the gateway to Mount Manaslu, rising to 26,770 feet, known as the Mountain of Spirits, and ranked among the 8 highest peaks in the world. At this elevation, oxygen levels drop to about half of normal conditions, making every movement place strain on the respiratory system and rapidly lead to physical exhaustion. The entire camp is established on a massive moving glacier, where cracks can appear at any moment and produce audible ice-fracturing sounds during the night. Temperatures often fall to around -4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is enough to freeze water and cause tissue damage upon contact with metal. During the climbing season, especially in September and October, hundreds of yellow and orange tents appear, forming a temporary human cluster across the snow and exposed rock landscape. Meteora is a hell on earth of devotion, where humans challenge death on towering stone fingers, rising 1,312 feet into the air. For centuries, monks imprisoned themselves in brutal isolation, enduring the flesh-tearing cold of winter and the body-scorching heat of the sandstone. They turned vertical rock cavities into homes, accepting total separation from the ground below in order to escape the slaughter of invading enemies. Building a monastery could take as long as 22 years just to haul each stone upward, yet one single moment of error meant being shattered in the valley below. As late as 1950, people still accepted being suspended over empty space, turning Meteora into one of the most terrifying symbols of insane endurance against violent nature. Naples Vanjava is a village where houses do not stand on flat ground, but cling directly to a mountainside so steep that every step feels like a test of gravity's limit. To create living space, residents cut foundations into the mountain wall and then build houses tightly side by side in stacked layers so that the roof of one home often becomes the yard or walkway for the home above it. But the real fragility does not lie in that unusual style of construction. It lies in the loose volcanic ash soil underneath, which can shift during long periods of heavy rain and turn the entire village into a place constantly threatened by landslides. Even getting in and out is a test of survival, because the slopes are so steep that motorcycles, the nearly only form of transport here, regularly overload their brakes, start smoking, and then lose control on the way down. The locals survive because they have highly skilled engine braking techniques, but many visitors do not, so crashes into ravines or rock walls still happen often enough that villagers sometimes have to stop people right at the bottom of the slope. Burj Al Babas holds the record as the most bizarre abandoned project in the world, built with the largest scale of identical architecture. Behind the fake luxury is the pain of ultra-wealthy investors who poured in hundreds of thousands of US dollars only to receive 580 castle shells made of bare concrete, with no electricity or running water, sitting in deep mud. This place is really a graveyard of financial dreams, where many families lost everything they had saved because they believed in the promise of a royal resort paradise. The hardship also fell on unpaid workers, pushing them into desperation as they were forced to remain at the ruined construction site through the freezing winter. The Hanging Temple is one of the most dangerous architectural structures in the world, hanging in a deeply haunting position against a vertical cliff. Dozens of heavy shrines appear to be supported only by thin wooden pillars, creating a terrifying visual trick. In reality, many of these loose pillars are so unstable that they can be turned by hand, carrying no real weight and existing only to calm the human mind. Despite that impossible precariousness, this wonder has proudly survived countless devastating earthquakes for 1,500 years. Behind it lies an extremely harsh monastic life, buried in knife-cold winds and receiving only 2 to 3 hours of sunlight each day. Every drop of water must be pulled up by pulley, and the moment you step outside the sleeping quarters, a bottomless abyss opens below, making this place a truly unreal world, balanced on the line between life and death. Would you dare remove a healthy part of your body just to earn a ticket to survival in the loneliest town on Earth? That is the brutal rule of the game at Villa Las Estrellas, where the nearest medical station lies about 621 miles away across the violent Drake Passage. To remain in the heart of Antarctica, every resident must voluntarily undergo appendix removal surgery, eliminating the risk of death when blizzards trap all rescue efforts in place. This land rejects every new beginning of life through a no pregnancy rule, forcing women to leave in order to protect their lives before it is too late. Amid countless dangers, people still choose to endure, turning their surgical scars into proof of human pride at the far edge of the world. L-Jimo is not only an offshore lighthouse, but a place where humans try to preserve a sign of life in a sea that can crush everything in an instant. The extremity of this place was carved into history on December 21st, 1989. When photographer Jean Guichard flew past at the exact moment a monstrous storm was hammering the entire tower. At the moment, lighthouse keeper Theodore Malgorn stepped out of the door. A gigantic wave almost as tall as a 10-story building surged in from behind and swallowed the whole lighthouse, leaving only about half a second between life and death. The lighthouse keepers had to avoid looking down at the waves for too long and always invent work to keep their minds occupied, because if the mind slips before reason does, this tower can turn into a deadly trap. Kangsa is the last settlement before people enter the Tilicho Lake region, where the line between life and a deadly white emptiness is separated by only a mountain trail. In winter, when heavy snow buries the stone rooftops and temperatures fall to -4 degrees Fahrenheit, Kangsa becomes a frozen oasis, completely cut off from civilization. Lying in a rain shadow zone, this place has only whistling winds carrying stone dust and scarce water from glaciers that are steadily running dry. At this elevation, there are no trees to burn, So the villagers collect yak dung by a hand, dry it on the walls, and burn it to cook food and keep a small amount of warmth through the long nights. Slab City is known as the last free place in America because of a way of life that stands completely outside ordinary social rules. But in reality, this is a true furnace in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, where extreme heat reaches 122 degrees Fahrenheit, while residents have no power grid and must endure the heat inside suffocating trailers or under makeshift shelters they build themselves. In this anarchic world, every conflict is settled by a violent law of the jungle and by gunshots that can erupt without warning in the middle of the night. Residents must survive inside deadly homes built from scrap and discarded waste, where fire can destroy everything in an instant with no fire trucks coming to help. Most frightening of all is the water used for washing from the Coachella Canal, a toxic flow soaked with pesticide residue and agricultural chemicals from nearby farms. Without sewer systems and with dark, broken sanitation, life here becomes a brutal cycle of pollution, where people trade their lives for absolute freedom. Can you believe that there is a place where children must gamble with their lives every day just to reach an education? Perched on a sheer cliff, 800 meters high, Atuli'er village is proof of one of the harshest struggles for survival on Earth, where for centuries, the only connection to the outside world was a set of rotting vine ladders clinging loosely to slippery limestone. Here, children have no privilege to be afraid, because from the age of 6, they must learn to grip the ladder to the sky with one deadly rule: let go and you die. Each trip to school takes 5 hours across the abyss, leaving these children able to return home only twice a month. Daily life is also an impossible burden, as villagers must carry their entire world on their backs, from cement sacks to refrigerators, crawling slowly along the vertical cliff. Only in 2016 did this nightmare begin to close, when the state invested in a solid steel staircase with 2,556 steps to make the route safer. Amid the white frozen sea of the Mont Blanc Massif, Refuge des Cosmiques stands precariously like a resting place that should not exist. Born in the 1930s, it began as a lonely physics laboratory, relentlessly searching for cosmic ray particles beneath layers of gray cloud. In just 20 short minutes, the cable car takes the body from about 3,300 feet straight up to about 12,500 feet, throwing it into immediate physical shock. And yet, in air so thin, it feels suffocating, and among glaciers that never stop shifting. Warm double rooms suddenly appear like the highest form of luxury, defying the survival instinct in a land of ice and death. Rocinha is the largest favela in Brazil, where people are forced to squeeze into a space that is almost completely full. Poverty shows itself most clearly in houses that keep adding floors until they reach 9 to 11 stories, while the foundations underneath are too weak to withstand heavy rain. That became clear in 2019, when sections of hillside suddenly collapsed, sweeping even the strongest homes into piles of rubble within seconds and killing a woman inside her own house. But Rocinha is even more terrifying because real power is often not in the hands of the state. When theft or rape happens, gangs enforce their own jungle law, with lighter punishment, meaning a hand is cut off, and harsher punishment, meaning execution. At the entrances to the favela, children only 10 to 12 years old already serve as lookouts, and when fireworks rise into the sky, that is not celebration, but a warning signal that a gunfight is about to begin. Behind their elegant beauty, looking like silk ribbons from satellite view, braided rivers in China are in reality deadly abysses filled with extreme traps. Beneath the dry sand that seems safe lie swamps of soft mud, ready to swallow entire herds of livestock in seconds. Even more terrifying are the brutal, timed flash floods. Without a single drop of rain, all it takes is intense heat, melting ice on the mountaintops, for a wall of muddy water mixed with massive rocks to come crashing down and crush every road or even the strongest bridge foundations. This sweeping force turns the entire plateau into a completely unstable zone, where a safe path today can become a violent torrent tomorrow and drag all life away with it.
Bem no fundo do Mar da Morte do Taklamakan, Daria Boy aparece como um pequeno ponto cercado pela natureza por todos os lados. A dureza aqui não está apenas no calor escaldante de 70 graus Celsius, ou nas tempestades de vento negro que engolem toda a visibilidade, mas também no aprisionamento total do isolamento. As refeições diárias refletem essa mesma escassez, pois os vegetais verdes e as frutas quase desapareceram, restando principalmente carne de cordeiro e pão kumbax, assado em cinzas quentes misturadas com areia. O solo brutalmente salgado apagou quase todo o sinal de vida, transformando a existência do povo Queria em uma luta teimosa pela sobrevivência, em que a linha entre a vida e a morte é tão fina quanto o rio Queria, agora sendo lentamente engolido pelo deserto.
Montserrat is not only a famous monastery of Catalonia, but also a place where people live directly beneath a maze of rock that can turn hostile at any moment. This mountain range is made of sandstone mixed with quartz, raising thousands of sharp and strangely twisted rock towers that turn Montserrat into a sanctuary for climbers, but also a deadly trap. Many highly experienced climbers have died here when rock slabs that seemed solid suddenly broke away from the cliff, dragging them into falls with no chance of rescue. What makes it more terrifying is how quickly the weather changes at Montserrat, when a clear morning can turn into thick fog and strong wind in just about 15 minutes, enough for people stranded on the rock face to lose direction and freeze to death before rescuers arrive. In 2007, after several days of heavy rain, a massive rock slide crashed down and crushed the monastery parking area, reminding everyone that at Montserrat, people still live directly beneath the blade of the mountain. Gunung is not only the narrowest city in the world, but also a giant rat trap filled with tragedy between the cliffs of Yunnan. Its harshness reaches an extreme level when more than 400,000 people are compressed inside a mountain gap only about 98 feet wide, hanging above the edge on fragile spider-leg stilts right beside the Guan River. The fragility of this city has already been proven through a bloody history, when a bridge collapse once sent 400 people to their deaths in the rushing water within seconds. Not only do residents live under the constant threat of flash floods, they also remain in permanent shadow because towering limestone cliffs block the sunlight for most of the day. And if the single road is cut by a landslide, Gunung can be almost severed from the outside world in a single moment. Wadi Rum is often called the Valley of the Moon, but this place is not beautiful in a gentle way. It is beautiful like a land always waiting for people to make a mistake. By day, the desert sun can burn human skin, and when night falls, the temperature drops so fast that the cold becomes a real threat. The greatest danger lies in the paradox of water, because in this land, cracked dry by heat, sudden rain can still turn narrow canyons into violent flash floods that wipe everything away in a very short time. The tragedy of 2018 is the clearest reminder that in Wadi Rum, danger can come from the very thing that seems rarest here. For lost travelers, the isolation, easily spoiled food, and easily contaminated drinking water make every step in Wadi Rum feel like a gamble with survival. Jalousie is a place where poverty has been dipped into a $1 million paint bucket to create a dazzling rainbow maze. Located directly within view of the luxury resorts in Pétionville, this slum has become one of the starkest images of wealth inequality in the world, where poor people are turned into a backdrop for lavish photographs. The government once spent about $1.4 million just to paint the outside of the houses, but behind those colors, many people still have no electricity, no clean water, and must share makeshift toilets. Many residents understand very clearly that they are living inside a picture decorated for other people to admire, not inside a project that truly saves them from poverty. But jealousy is also dangerous because a single heavy rain can become a disaster, and if one house near the top of the slope collapses, the entire row of houses below can come down with it. That is why many people call this place a beautifully made-up corpse, rather than a community that has truly been rescued. At Madonna della Corona, faith is not measured by prayer, but by a heartbeat racing wildly between devotion and the abyss. The construction of this sanctuary was a deadly expedition on the sheer limestone cliffs of Mount Baldo. In the 16th century, workers had to entrust their lives to thin ropes braided from plant fibers hanging in mid-air to carve into rock as hard as steel. Each block of Verona marble was hauled upward with crude pulley systems that could fail at any moment under the terrifying weight. The harshness reached its limit when pilgrims chose to climb 5,051 steps on their knees, turning physical pain into a measure of devotion. Could you survive in a place where running water turns to ice and the only source of warmth comes from dried cow dung in temperatures of -22 degrees Fahrenheit? In Kiba, life is not just difficult in the ordinary sense, but a real struggle for survival against the extreme conditions of the Himalayas. For 6 months of winter, when every water pipe freezes solid and cracks apart, residents must rely on traditional dry toilets to maintain the bare minimum of daily life. Precious water at that time depends entirely on a single bore well or on melting snow, with the help of resilient donkeys moving through deep snow. In the middle of the freezing cold, the tandoor stove becomes the only heart that holds onto warmth, and the whole family must sleep together in one room to save every small bit of scarce dry fuel. San Pedro Sula was once a true living hell when it carried the terrifying title of the murder capital of the world. From 2011 to 2014, the violence here was so extreme that for every 100,000 residents, as many as 187 people were murdered. Imagine this: in a relatively small city of just over 700,000 people, at least 3 people on average lost their lives violently in the streets every single day. The chaos reached its peak inside the central prison, where the authorities were completely powerless and had to give control over to the criminals themselves. Behind those harsh walls, crime bosses turned the prison into a miniature city where they could freely run businesses and manage their gangs. Until it was shut down in 2017, this place remained a symbol of terror in a land where life had become so cheap that tomorrow could not be taken for granted. The Sundarbans is the largest mangrove maze on Earth, where Bengal tigers not only survive, but completely dominate an extreme saltwater environment. With a population in the hundreds, the striped ghosts here treat humans as natural prey, ready to swim across rivers or slip into villages under cover of darkness to hunt. The danger reaches its peak during wild honey collection, when people must wade bare-handed through waist-deep mud while facing ambushes from tigers and giant saltwater crocodiles more than 16 feet long. Not only that, this kingdom of king cobras and venomous snakes also hides killers waiting above on tree branches or inside fishing nets. Cruelly, even though it is surrounded by endless waterways, this is one of the most desperate places on Earth for fresh water because of severe salt intrusion.